This is CNN Breaking News.
Hey everybody, what's going on? SpireKid here. I wish it was a pretty much of a pretty more normal day, but not really. I was going to stream yesterday, but yesterday was such a ridiculous and unbelievable day for the United States, as Capitol Hill, where most of the politics is done in the country, was invaded by pro-Trump domestic terrorists, incited by who I will now call a domestic terrorist, President Donald Trump. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that it's gotten up to this point where a lot more politicians are calling for the removal of Donald Trump when it took up to this point, where 4 were killed, numerous people terrorized inside the Capitol Hill. Alright, and we'll get to all the latest on this stupid breaking news story with an extended look at Reuters headlines for today, extended to 15 minutes, just because of how significant this is, and, of course, coverage of the coronavirus pandemic.
You're watching Reuters TV. Here are your top stories.
Washington reels a day after the Capitol chaos.
U.S. Congress and companies react to Trump's response to riots.
From Macron to Modi, world leaders condemn the violence of Washington.
This is Reuters Now.
Just unbelievable.
Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 300.
Just hours after hundreds of supporters of President Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol, a shaken Congress has now certified Democrat Joe Biden's election victory. And the White House has released a statement in which Trump pledges an orderly transition when Biden is sworn in, although the statement also repeats the false claim that Trump won.
Does a gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Floor debate in Congress resumed, stretching into the early hours on Thursday after police secured the building. Both the House and Senate overwhelmingly rejected 2 objections to the vote tally for Arizona and Pennsylvania, certified that Biden received 306 votes to Trump's 232. 4 people are now known to have died during the chaos, according to police. 1 from gunshot wounds and 3 from medical emergencies. 52 people were arrested at the time. The outcome of this vote tally was never in doubt, but those who stormed the Capitol did force their way through security barricades, shattered windows, and scaled walls to fight their way in. Some besieged the chamber holding the floor of the House of Representatives while lawmakers were still inside, forcing suspension of the debate. Security officers barricaded the door with furniture before helping lawmakers escape. Vice President Mike Pence, who'd already angered Trump by resisting his calls to intervene in the vote, called it a dark day in U.S. history when he reconvened the session.
To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win. Violence never wins. Freedom wins. And this is still the people's house.
Several Republicans who'd previously supported Trump's claims of widespread voter fraud and were expected to mount objections to the vote tally changed their minds by the time they had returned the chamber, and also urged their fellow lawmakers to certify Biden's victory. Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler was one of them after losing her re-election campaign in Georgia less than 24 hours earlier. That state has flipped the balance of power in Senate to the Democrats.
The violence, the lawlessness, and siege of the halls of Congress are abhorrent and stand as a direct attack on the very institution my objection was intended to protect.
Trump, who'd refused to concede to Biden, had urged his supporters on Wednesday morning to march in the Capitol and, quote, fight. His legal challenges to Biden's victory have been rejected by courts across the country.
Terrorists.
After mobs of pro-Trump protesters stormed the U.S. Capitol, outrage against the U.S. president grew from both lawmakers and big-name American companies on Wednesday. Republican House lawmaker and daughter to a former vice president, Liz Cheney, tweeted, "There is no question that the president formed the mob. The president incited the mob. The president addressed the mob. He lit the flame." In a statement, former Republican President George W. Bush called the events in the U.S. Capitol an insurrection and blamed political leaders for undermining democracy since the November election. Twitter suspended President Trump's Twitter account for 12 hours on Wednesday and warned he could be permanently kicked off for violations of the platform's rules. Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said she was drawing up articles of impeachment after Trump's urging to fight his election loss. Even though there are 2 weeks left before Trump leaves office, Omar tweeted that, quote, "We can't allow him to remain in office. It's a matter of preserving our republic, and we need to fulfill our oath." Meanwhile, the head of a major business group that represents thousands of companies, from Pfizer to ExxonMobil, urged top U.S. officials to consider removing Trump from office. National Association of Manufacturers president and CEO Jay Timmons said Trump incited violence in an attempt to retain power, and that, quote, "Vice President Pence, who was evacuated from the Capitol, should seriously consider working with the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment to preserve democracy."
The decision by Twitter, Facebook, and Snapchat to lock President Trump's social media accounts in reaction to the chaos at the Capitol is one of the most tense moments between the man, the social media giants, and his supporters in his 4-year presidency. Mark Zuckerberg, in a scathing public statement, said a block on Facebook and Instagram would last until Trump leaves office at the earliest. Twitter hid 3 of Trump's tweets during the incident, which it called the result of a, quote, "unprecedented and ongoing violent situation," and stated that it would remain locked until he deleted the tweets altogether, which he has reportedly done. In some of his messages that night, the president called on protests to remain peaceful. In the hidden tweets, though, he says that storming the building was a natural response from great patriots. He also said Vice President Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done during the vote count, which was further pursue Trump's unsubstantiated claims of election fraud.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us.
Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, which is owned by Google, also took down this video from the White House.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil.
There has been
domestic terrorists
among the tech giants behind the scenes. At Facebook, for example, internal communications seen by Reuters show employees demanding that Trump's accounts be shut down permanently. One employee posted, quote, "Can we get some courage and actual action from leadership in response to this behavior?" And "Your silence is disappointing at the least and criminal at the worst." Facebook's communications managers quickly shut down the comment sections in those internal posts. Meanwhile, Facebook's former security chief, Alex Stamos, tweeted that Facebook and Twitter have to cut Trump off. Facebook and Twitter have recently cracked down more aggressively against not just Trump's false messages, but conspiracy theorist supporters like QAnon, and reported an increase in violent rhetoric. Some groups have moved off the mainstream social media platforms instead to places outside the tech giants' reach.
Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine may be effective for much longer than you think. Moderna CEO Stefan Bancel addressed the issue Thursday at an event organized by a financial services group.
The nightmare scenario that was described in the media in the spring, if you recall, the vaccine will not work more than a month or two. This nightmare scenario, I think, is off the window. We believe there will be protection potentially a couple years.
But he said more data is still needed to make a definitive assessment. He said the immediate focus is on the vaccine's effectiveness on seniors.
The question, I think, is going to be really around the elderly, because as it's true for every virus, the immune system of the elderly goes down in terms of ability over time.
the length of protection was a lingering question for scientists and regulators, given that Moderna is just one of the companies that worked at warp speed to turn out a coronavirus vaccine in just a few weeks. Normally, vaccines take years to develop. The European Commission approved Moderna's vaccine on Wednesday. Bonsell said Moderna was about to prove that its vaccine would also be effective against variants of the coronavirus seen in Britain and South Africa. Moderna shares, which have jumped sixfold over the last 12 months, rose in early trading Thursday.
World leaders, including US allies, have been quick to express their shock and dismay at the scenes of chaos in Washington after the Capitol building was stormed on Wednesday by rioters supporting President Donald Trump. Prime ministers and presidents from around the world have called on Trump and his supporters to respect the result of the November election.
I just wanted to express our friendship and our faith in the United States.
French President Emmanuel Macron posted a video saying what happened is not American. We believe in the strength of the American democracy. While UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson called the violence a disgrace. Elsewhere in Latin America, the leaders of Argentina and Chile took to Twitter to condemn the scenes in Washington. While Venezuela, a country with a recent history of unrest, said it hoped the US could open a new path towards stability and social justice. In Asia, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's forged a good relationship with Trump, tweeted that he was distressed by the scenes and called for an orderly and peaceful transfer of power. Meanwhile, Russia's deputy UN ambassador, Dmitry Polansky, appeared to revel in what was going on. He tweeted, "Quite maiden-style pictures are coming from DC," in reference to the 2014 protests in Ukraine that toppled the Russian-backed president, Viktor Yanukovych.
First thing we gain.
Israel has become a world leader in the race to administer COVID-19 vaccines, but some of its Arab citizens and Palestinians in annexed East Jerusalem are proving skeptical of the shot. Officials believe misinformation about possible side effects or supposed malicious properties has led to lower turnout in these groups. Jerusalem resident Maruf Alino has his doubts about the vaccine and says many Arabs are getting their information about the jab on social media.
I will not be vaccinated because I don't know what is in there. I don't know what the positive or negative side effects are. No one explained to me anything about it. Everyone is looking at Facebook and social media sites where we hear about someone dying after the vaccine, another one who got an allergy, or they got the virus itself. We, as Jerusalemites and Arabs, will stay away from the vaccine, and I will refuse to be vaccinated.
It's less than a fortnight since Israel launched its vaccination drive on December 19th, and the Health Ministry said on Thursday that 17.5% of the population and 70% of citizens aged 60 or older had already received their first shots. Farida Mahajne, the director of a vaccination centre in the northern town of Al-Fam, said turnout was meagre at first, but attendance numbers are now on the up.
The centre was opened 9-10 days ago. In the beginning, the turnout was somehow low, but today the turnout is increasing day after day among the Arab residents. I'm talking about Al-Fam area and its surroundings. People should know that everyone should be vaccinated, and it is safe.
The slowdown in some Arab communities has prompted citizens from the Jewish majority to seek clinics there in the hope of finding shorter lines. Sometimes leftover vaccines have been given to walk-ins who aren't within a high-risk priority group.
Vaccine as quickly as possible.
Extraordinary scenes in the US, but global investors are looking beyond the chaos on Capitol Hill. As protesters stormed the Senate, traders were focused on the 2 Georgia election wins that hand control of Congress to the Democrats. Investors bet that means the incoming administration of Joe Biden will get through an agenda including extra stimulus spending. After US stocks hit fresh record highs, heavyweight names then led gains across Asian markets. Chip makers Samsung and SK Hynix helped drive South Korea's benchmark index to a record high. The Kospi closed up by over 2%. Japan's Nikkei index was only a little behind, hitting 30-year highs. The dollar headed the other way, wallowing at near 3-year lows. That, on bets extra stimulus spending will see US budget and trade deficits widen further. European markets then opened with gains, with Germany's DAX index up around 0.5% early on. Sentiment there was helped by more surprisingly positive data. Better than expected industrial orders, an encouraging sign of resilience in the continent's economic powerhouse. The focus remains on Washington, however. With Biden now certified by Congress as the next president, traders will be watching to see if calm is restored.
Amazon on Wednesday said it would spend $2 billion to create affordable homes in areas where 3 of its major U.S. employment hubs are located. The goal? At least 20,000 affordable housing units in the Puget Sound area of Washington state, Arlington, Virginia, where there are plans for another Amazon hub, and Nashville, Tennessee. Amazon.com said a large chunk of its investment will be through low-cost loans to preserve or build housing for moderate to low-income families. Amazon and other tech companies have faced criticism in recent years for driving up home prices in places like San Francisco due to an influx of tech workers. Facebook and Google have invested in affordable housing too, attempting to ease the strain on neighborhoods flooded with employees.
You're up to date. Check back later as stories develop.
Such a chaotic historic time there in the U.S. Capitol. It's outrageous. This is just basically, that was just basically a riot over nothing. Literally. Nothing of any substance. People are believing in lies, and that's what it's come up to. 4 people dead. Numbers injured and terrified. We'll continue to cover this as the day goes on. And I'll give you more updates as they come in available. Okay, in the meantime, I'll be grinding more for more health seeds in the game. Let's get right to it. Back here.
出番かの。よいしょ。
Oh, what am I doing?
燃えてきたわ。任せて。よいしょ。
一気に行くぞ。
出番かしら。やるわよ。
行くぞ。やるぞ。
神様。
ディラレ終わったな。やるぞ。
よいしょ。私の出番ね。よいしょ。よいしょ。ご無理なさらずありがとう。大丈夫ですか？
おっと。
よいしょ。よいしょ。神様。
助かったぜ。
よいしょ。 よいしょ。
腕が鳴るの。
覚悟しなさい。
さあ行くぜ。やろうぜ。行くぜ。
大丈夫ですか？
元気出しな。
ありがとう。ほーら。
俺たちの勝ちだ。
さあ行きましょう。よいしょ。痛かった。神様。
助かったぜ。
よいしょ。よいしょ。よいしょ。覚悟しなさい。
出番かの。
よいしょ。
パワー全開。
よいしょ。任せて。やるわよ。
いきます。
いやー、行くわよ。 始めましょう。頑張ります。お願いします。よいしょ。よいしょ。よいしょ。よいしょ。遅い。よいしょ。よいしょ。よいしょ。よいしょ。燃えてきたわ。
腕が鳴る。
よいしょ。出番かしら。
やろうぜ。
さあ。
おととい来やがった。
Unfortunately, I think I have to cut the stream short. I'm starting to get a little bit tired. I think I need a nap. Alright, that was part 28 of Dragon Quest XI-S PS4 Pro Hard Mode. Thank you guys for joining and watching. I'm SpireKid. I'll see you guys next time.